I'm Marlo. And let me tell you, nothing hits harder than realizing your own family made a place for you at the kids' table. At my sister's birthday, I showed up, dressed like an adult, expected to be treated like family, and instead, they sat me with the children like I didn't belong. But that wasn't the worst part. That night, I walked away quietly. But what I didn't know was how deep the cracks ran. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. It didn't start at that party. It started long before, when they decided I'd always be the outsider. And what I uncovered after I left, well, let's just say, it nearly burned the whole family down. So why would a family go so far to erase one of their own? It started with a ping. A family group chat notification lit up my phone that Thursday afternoon while I was buried in paperwork at my apartment in Houston. Clarissa Carter, Mom. Hey Marlo! Hope you can make it Saturday. We're throwing Celine's birthday at the Monarch. Saved you a seat with the family and kids. Let me know. It wasn't an invitation. It was a reminder, a subtle signal of where I stood. A seat with the kids, again. Like always, I stared at the message, wondering why I still let it sting. But I didn't respond right away. I'd learned to swallow that feeling, like background noise you live with. As the weekend neared, the group chat lit up with excitement about the rooftop dinner, the cake, the guest list, and that old weight settled in my chest again. Familiar, quiet, heavy. Saturday came too fast. I worked most of the day, tempted to use my workload as an excuse. But guilt, or duty, won out. At 6:45 p.m., I pulled on a navy blue dress that felt more like armor than fashion. By 7:30, I was driving down I-45 toward Austin, headlights cutting through the dark. I told myself I wasn't going for them. I was going because if I didn't, they'd say I was difficult, dramatic, playing the victim. By 8:45, I was outside the Monarch, an upscale rooftop spot glowing with fairy lights. Luxury cars lined the valet. I checked my reflection, forced a smile, and stepped inside. I knew immediately I didn't belong here, not really. Laughter rang out too loud. Conversations felt too curated. The hostess greeted me with a careful smile. Name? Marlo Carter, I said, smoothing my dress. She scanned her list too long. Ah, table C, with the family and kids. She gestured to a corner near the railing. High chairs, crayons, booster seats. I swallowed the heat rising in my chest and walked over. The kids barely looked up. The adults were at the bar, glasses clinking, deep in conversation. Clarissa passed me once, champagne in hand. She gave me a nod and kept walking. Seline stood glowing at the center, the star of the night, surrounded by admiration. I sat at table C, invisible. People noticed. Their looks said it all, pity, amusement. She's still here, still trying. It wasn't just about the seat. It was the years of being overlooked, the forgotten birthdays, the holiday photos I was asked to take, not be in. Always the quiet one, the dependable one, so Seline could shine. At 9:30, the lights dimmed. Clarissa took the mic. Thank you for coming to celebrate our shining star, Seline, she said. She thanked everyone, Celine's friends, Cassian's family, the kids, the staff, even the bartender, but not me. By 9:45, I stood up and left. Quietly. No one noticed. No one stopped me. At the door, I glanced back. Seline laughed, radiant, adored. I walked away. What I didn't know was that walking out wouldn't be the end. It would be the start of everything unraveling. I didn't stop walking until the glow of the Monarch's rooftop lights faded behind me, swallowed by the Austin skyline. The sound of glasses clinking and fake laughter still echoed in my ears as I reached my car parked 2 blocks away. I slipped behind the wheel, sat there for a moment, staring blankly at the steering wheel, trying to shake off the tightness in my chest. As I sat in the driver's seat, the memory of Clarissa's voice from just minutes ago played on a cruel loop inside my head. Thank you all for coming to celebrate our shining star, Seline. And to all our wonderful guests, Cassian's family, Celine's friends, and of course, our amazing family. Her words floated above the crowd like confetti, warm, inclusive, until they weren't. Because when her eyes swept the tables, they passed over mine like I wasn't even there. I remembered how she thanked the kids at my table, thanked the staff, even thanked the damn bartender, but never once said my name. By the time I started the car and pulled away from the curb, it was almost 10 p.m. The streets of downtown Austin buzzed with people spilling out of restaurants, couples holding hands, groups laughing too loud. I kept driving in silence. Halfway back to Houston, headlights slicing through the night, I felt it. This dull ache under my ribcage that wasn't just from tonight. It was an old wound, something I'd learned to carry, like a chipped tooth you learn not to bite down on. Because tonight wasn't new, it was just the most public. As the miles passed beneath me, my mind went back, like it always did, to all the moments that built this one. I thought about Christmas dinners when Clarissa would gush about Celine's promotions or her perfect boyfriend, then glance at me with that empty smile, as if she couldn't remember what I'd been doing that year. I thought about high school graduations, family BBQs, birthdays, especially birthdays. My knuckles tightened around the steering wheel when a memory I hadn't let myself touch in years resurfaced. I was 12. It was a gray February afternoon, and I came home from school to find Clarissa busy frosting cupcakes, balloons taped across the kitchen cabinets. My heart jumped. Maybe she remembered. Except the balloons were pink and silver, and the cupcakes were for Celine's 10th birthday. My birthday had been 3 weeks earlier. I'd spent it alone in my room with a store-bought cake I picked up myself. That night, when I finally asked Mom why she hadn't done anything, she smiled like I'd asked something silly. "You're older now, Marlo. You don't need all that." As if growing up meant you stopped deserving to be seen. I let the memory settle heavy in my chest as I merged onto Interstate 10. The clock on the dashboard blinked 11:45 p.m. By the time I reached Houston and pulled into my apartment complex, it was after midnight. The city was quieter here, streetlights casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. I parked, climbed the stairs to my second-floor unit, and unlocked the door to the stillness waiting inside. I kicked off my heels, set my phone face down on the counter without checking it, and walked straight to the living room window. Outside, the city lights stretched out like tiny fires, and for a long moment, I just stood there, breathing. It hit me then, how exhausted I was. Not from the drive, but from everything leading up to tonight. From years of pretending the crumbs they tossed my way were enough. The speech, the empty chair, the kids' table. It wasn't about the party, it never had been. It was about being invisible in a family that smiled for photos, but never saw me standing right there. Somewhere deep down, I knew this night would change something. I didn't know how or when, but there was a shift inside me. A thread pulled too tight, finally snapping loose. I turned away from the window, grabbed my phone, and checked it without thinking. 3 missed texts, all from Clarissa. "You didn't have to leave like that. It was Celine's night. I hope you're not making this about you again. Call me when you calm down." I laughed under my breath, low, humorless, the audacity. I set the phone back down and stood in the middle of my apartment, realizing for the first time that night, I was done trying to belong. I walked out of that party thinking I was leaving the past behind. But what I didn't know then was that walking away wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. The texts from Clarissa were still sitting on my phone when I woke up the next morning, as if they'd been waiting all night to remind me I was the problem. I'd left my phone face down on the kitchen counter before collapsing into bed around 1 a.m., too drained to deal with anyone's guilt trip messages. When I finally rolled out of bed at 8 a.m., sunlight cutting through the slats of my blinds, the weight of last night returned before my feet even touched the floor. I made coffee on autopilot, trying to shake the heaviness in my chest. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was that old gnawing ache, the one that started years before anyone sent me a text saying I was too sensitive. The coffee maker beeped, pulling me back. I poured a mug, sat down on the edge of my couch, and finally picked up my phone. More messages. Clarissa again. You didn't have to leave like that. It was Celine's day. A second one, time-stamped after midnight. Honestly, Marlo, you could have just smiled and gotten through the night. Why do you always have to make it about you? And then Seline. Hers arrived just after 1:30 a.m. Grow up, Marlo. You've always needed to be the center of attention. You couldn't let me have one night without making a scene. I stared at the screen, the bitter taste in my mouth sharper than the coffee. There it was. Even when I quietly walked away, even when I didn't say a word, they still blamed me. I put the phone down, but my thoughts kept circling like vultures. This wasn't new. It wasn't the first time they painted me as selfish for reacting to being overlooked. I'd spent a lifetime walking that tightrope. If I spoke up, I was dramatic. If I stayed quiet, I disappeared. The pattern was so familiar, so rehearsed, it almost made me laugh. But underneath that numbness, something sharper stirred. After I showered and dressed, I spent the rest of the morning cleaning, scrubbing counters that were already spotless, rearranging books that didn't need moving. Anything to keep myself from sitting still long enough to let the rage catch up to me. By noon, I gave up pretending I could avoid it. I sat back down on the couch, scrolling through my phone again, wondering if the weight in my chest would ever let up. That's when I saw it. One unread message at the bottom of the pile. From Dad. Edgar Carter wasn't the kind of man who sent texts at all, much less in the middle of family chaos. But there it was, sent at 2:07 a.m. Marlo, I'm sorry. I should have said something years ago. I knew how they treated you. I was just too weak to stop it. The words blurred on the screen. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stared, letting the words land like a quiet earthquake. I couldn't even remember the last time my father admitted to noticing anything, let alone acknowledged what I'd felt my entire life. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it cracked something open, because it meant I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been too sensitive. He'd seen it too, and he did nothing. I leaned back, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. My coffee had gone cold. My chest felt heavy, but not in the same way as before. The truth settled in, slow and sobering. This wasn't about one birthday party. It wasn't even about Seline being the golden child or Clarissa weaponizing guilt like a second language. This was about the system they built, a story I'd been cast in without consent. I was the villain in their narrative because it made them the heroes. I didn't reply to anyone's texts that morning. Not Clarissa, not Seline, not even Dad. Instead, I sat there, staring at the screen until the words blurred again, and decided, no more silence, no more pretending. They wanted me to play the part of the problem. Maybe it was time I showed them what the problem really looked like. I didn't know how deep the lies went, but I was about to find out. The message came 2 days later, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, when I thought the storm had passed. I'd spent most of the day working from home, answering emails and pretending that what happened at the Monarch was behind me. The drizzle tapping against my window matched the rhythm of my thoughts. Quiet, relentless, hard to ignore. It wasn't until late afternoon, around 4 p.m., that my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar name lighting up the screen. Cassian Brooks. I hesitated before opening it. Cassian was Celine's boyfriend. We'd barely exchanged more than polite hellos over the years. He was part of her orbit, not mine. His message was short. Marlo, can we talk? Coffee? Tomorrow morning? I stared at the screen, suspicion curling in my stomach. Why would he want to talk to me? Still, curiosity won. The next morning, the clouds had cleared, but the air felt heavy. I made the drive back to Austin, a part of me wondering if I was being foolish, if this was another setup I hadn't seen coming. By 9 a.m., I was sitting at a corner table in a quiet coffee shop downtown, nursing a latte I didn't really want. Cassian walked in 5 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked. Dark circles smudged beneath his eyes. He scanned the room until he spotted me, then walked over. "Marlo," he greeted, voice stiff. "Cassian," I replied, motioning for him to sit. "Didn't expect to hear from you." He sat across from me, fiddling with his coffee cup like he didn't know where to begin. "I shouldn't be here," he said finally, "but after what I heard, I couldn't keep quiet." That got my attention. He glanced around, lowering his voice. The night of the party, before everyone arrived, I overheard Clarissa and Seline. My stomach tightened. "Overheard what?" Cassian exhaled, shoulders slumping. "They were in the back lounge, laughing about how you'd react when you saw your table." I didn't move. I couldn't. "They said," he swallowed, eyes meeting mine. "They said you'd finally know your place when you were seated with the kids." And then Clarissa joked, "She'll never leave. She needs us more than we need her." His words cracked something open inside me, sharp and immediate. It hadn't been carelessness. It hadn't been an oversight. It had been cruelty, calculated, deliberate. For a moment, the sound of the coffee shop around me faded. All I could hear was that voice in my head whispering the same thing it always had. "You don't matter." I looked down at my hands, curling them into fists beneath the table. Cassian cleared his throat. "I thought maybe it was just a bad joke. But the way you left that night, I realized it wasn't the first time, was it?" I shook my head slowly, the weight of it pressing down on me. "No," I said quietly. "It's never just one night." Images flickered behind my eyes. Birthday parties where I wasn't mentioned. Holidays where I took the photos instead of being in them. Whispered comments about how I was too sensitive, too much, or worse. Invisible. Cassian's voice broke through the spiral. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have said something sooner." I met his gaze then, something cold settling in my chest. "It's not your apology I need," I replied, "but thank you." He shifted uncomfortably. "I don't think they understand what they've done." A bitter smile touched my lips. "Oh, they understand. They've been doing it my entire life." For the first time in days, I felt something shift. Not sadness, not helplessness, resolve. I leaned back, my voice steady. "They think I won't do anything. They're wrong." Cassian nodded, like he understood more than he wanted to. I stood up, sliding my chair back quietly. As I grabbed my coat, I glanced at him one last time. "Thanks for telling me," I said, "but this isn't your fight." When I stepped out into the bright morning light, the decision was already made. The game they'd been playing, I was finally ready to play back. I drove back to Houston after that meeting with Cassian, the weight in my chest heavier than when I'd arrived in Austin. But there was something else burning underneath it. Clarity. For the next 2 days, I kept my head down. I went to work, answered emails, paid bills. On the surface, I was living my usual life. But under all of that, something in me had shifted. On the third morning, as I was sorting through invoices in my home office, my phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized, but the area code was Austin. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I answered, cautious. A calm, measured voice replied. "Marlo?" "This is Mirabel Brooks." My heart stopped for a beat. Cassian's mother. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and people stopped talking, not out of fear, but because they wanted to hear what she'd say. "We've never spoken directly," she continued, "but I think we should." I cleared my throat. "What is this about?" She paused, then said quietly, "I'd rather not discuss it over the phone." "Could you meet me? I believe we have something in common." An hour later, I was back on the road toward Austin, wondering how many more surprises this family could throw at me. We met at an upscale cafe tucked into a quiet corner of downtown. The kind of place where everyone wore pressed clothes and whispered politely. Mirabel was already seated when I arrived, perfectly composed in a cream blazer, a porcelain cup of tea in front of her. She stood when I approached. "Marlo," she greeted, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from her, folding my hands on the table. "I won't waste your time," she began, sliding a manila folder across the table toward me. "I wanted you to see this before it becomes public knowledge." I glanced down at the folder, but didn't open it yet. "What is it?" Mirabel's gaze didn't waver. "Documentation showing that Seline attempted to use the Brooks family name to secure a private business loan, without Cassian's knowledge or consent." Her voice remained steady, but I could hear the steel underneath. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails, loan applications, even a draft agreement where Seline listed herself as a family representative. It was all there: names, dates, signatures she wasn't authorized to use. I swallowed hard, each page heavier than the last. She was counting on Cassian's family money to back her new venture, Mirabel said quietly, without ever asking. My fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. This is fraud," Mirabel nodded once. "And manipulation, which, I believe, isn't new behavior in your family." I looked up at her, something icy settling behind my ribs. "You knew she was capable of this?" "I suspected," she said simply, "but what I heard after the party confirmed it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the cafe felt far away, like background noise to something larger, uglier. When I finally spoke, my voice was quieter but sharper. "Why tell me?" Mirabel folded her hands. "Because you're the only one who seems willing to see the truth." When I left the cafe 20 minutes later, the folder was in my bag and my phone was already in my hand. I didn't hesitate. By the time I reached my car, I had sent the message to Clarissa and Seline, both. "Why, if you keep trying to control me and hurt others, I won't stay quiet anymore." The response from Clarissa came within minutes. "Marlo, you're being dramatic. This is family business. You always blow things out of proportion." Seline, of course, said nothing. I sat there in my car, staring at the screen, feeling the heat rise behind my eyes. Not from hurt this time, but from anger. They weren't even surprised. They didn't deny it. They dismissed me like they always had. But this wasn't like before. Because now, I had proof. This wasn't about birthday parties or forgotten names and speeches anymore. This was about how far they were willing to go to keep me in my place, and how far I'd have to go to tear that place down. I took a breath, steadying myself, and typed one final message to Clarissa. "Keep pretending this is nothing. You're about to see exactly how much nothing looks like when it burns." I hit send. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They were about to see just how wrong they were. The message I sent to Clarissa burned in the back of my mind long after I hit send. For 2 days, the silence was deafening. No texts, no calls, no carefully worded apologies. Just quiet. Until the knock at my door. It was Thursday evening. I'd spent most of the day working from home, reviewing financial reports for a client, trying to pretend the storm wasn't circling closer. Around 7:30 p.m., I was just about to shut down my laptop when the pounding came, a sharp, impatient knock that rattled the door. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Seline. When I opened the door, she was standing there, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like I'd personally set her world on fire. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice tight. I didn't bother to hide my sigh. "I guess." She brushed past me, walking into the living room like she owned the place. The second the door closed behind us, she spun to face me. "Are you seriously trying to ruin my life?" There it was. No hello, no explanation, straight to the accusation. I folded my arms. "You showed up uninvited to my home to ask me that?" She took a step forward. "You've been talking to Mirabel, to Cassian, spreading lies." I shook my head, a dry laugh slipping out. "No lies, Seline, just facts, ones you worked really hard to bury." Her lips curled into something between a sneer and a smirk. "You're jealous. You always have been." "Jealous?" I repeated, incredulous. "Of what? The lies? The manipulation?" Seline rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You've always needed someone to blame for why your life is so sad." That word snapped something in me. "Don't." I warned quietly. She ignored me. You couldn't stand that it was my night, that Mom loves me more. So now you're what? Playing detective? Digging up things that aren't your business? I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay steady. Seline, it became my business when you dragged my name through the mud and laughed about it. When you sat back and let Mom treat me like a footnote for 30 years. Her jaw tightened. I stepped closer. You don't get to walk in here and pretend like I'm the one who started this. For a second, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Uncertainty. But she buried it quickly. You need to drop this, Marlo, she snapped. You're about to tear this family apart. I met her glare, something cold settling in my chest. Maybe it needs to break, I said softly. Maybe that's the only way to rebuild it without all the rot. Seline scoffed. You're unbelievable. Without another word, she stormed toward the door, yanking it open. Before she left, she turned back one last time. You're gonna regret this. The door slammed behind her. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something sharper. Resolve. Later that night, around 10 p.m., I was on the couch with a book I wasn't reading when my phone pinged. An email. From Clarissa. Subject line, let's not do this. I clicked it open. Sweetheart, it began. I know you're upset, but this doesn't have to get ugly. You know how Seline is. She doesn't mean half the things she says. Don't let this tear our family apart. There it was again. That carefully polished, insincere tone. The fake concern. The manipulation. The email ended with, let's talk soon. I know you don't really mean to cause trouble. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I deleted the message without replying. I wasn't falling for it anymore. No more gaslighting. No more pretending this was normal. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, the hum of the city outside my window like background noise to the decision already made inside me. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. The days after Seline showed up at my door passed like a blur of static. I went to work. I logged into meetings. I smiled politely at the neighbors in the hallway. But something in me had hardened. By the 6th day after the party, the war began. It started quietly. A co-worker in my office's break room gave me a strange look as I poured my coffee. Someone I barely spoke to, a woman named Ashley, said under her breath, Hey, hope you're doing okay? Heard things have been rough at home. I frowned, forcing a polite smile. I'm fine, thanks. That was the first crack. By lunchtime, 3 more colleagues had awkwardly mentioned family drama I hadn't told them about. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Small-town gossip. Maybe someone saw Seline outside my apartment the other night. But when I checked my phone at 3 p.m., it was undeniable. Group chat messages, extended family threads, even a few DMs on Facebook, all hinting at the same thing. Is everything okay, Marlo? Your mom mentioned you've been struggling. I hope you're getting help. Clarissa said you've been lashing out a lot lately. Seline said you left her party in tears. Wish you'd just talk to her. My hands tightened around the phone as I scrolled, the words blurring together in one sickening thread. They were painting me unstable, mentally fragile, bitter, the unstable daughter causing family chaos. I set the phone down, breath shallow. They weren't just fighting back. They were trying to discredit me. Clarissa and Seline had done this before, in smaller ways. Little comments about how I overreacted, how I was too emotional. But now it was public. They were playing dirty. By evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Aunt Carol, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, texted, I know you're hurting, honey. Don't burn bridges. One of my closest friends called, voice hesitant. Your mom reached out to me, said you're spiraling. The word echoed in my head like a slap. I stood at my kitchen window, staring out at the Houston skyline, fury pulsing behind my ribs. This was how they'd always won. Not by fighting fair, but by convincing everyone else I was the problem. And for most of my life, I'd let them. Not this time. I grabbed my phone and scrolled back through my messages until I found Cassian's name. My thumb hovered for a moment before I typed, You deserve to know the truth. before you marry into this. I attached every document Mirabel had given me, the emails, the fake loan agreements, the messages Clarissa and Seline had sent over the years. Then I added one more message. They've spent their whole lives making me the villain, but you should know who's really pulling the strings. I hit send. It was almost midnight when I shut my laptop, the last remnants of my workday forgotten. The smear campaign had made one thing clear. There was no going back. I wasn't the family problem. I was the only one who'd finally stopped pretending. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence felt heavier than ever, but it wasn't suffocating. It was the calm before the storm. They tried to silence me. Instead, I just handed them the match. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, my phone buzzed with a single message from Cassian. "We need to talk." That was it. No hello, no pleasantries. The same Cassian who, a week ago, had barely spoken to me beyond polite nods, now wanted to talk. I replied with a simple, "Tell me when and where." That afternoon, I drove back to Austin. The clouds hanging low over the city felt like a weight pressing against my chest. When I arrived at Cassian's house, he was already waiting by the front door, hands shoved in his pockets, jaw tight. He didn't invite me inside. Instead, he spoke right there on the porch. "I ended it," he said without preamble. "With Seline." I blinked, trying to process. He went on. "After everything you sent me, the financial documents, the messages, the lies, I couldn't ignore it anymore." There was no triumph in his voice, just exhaustion. "My family knows," he added. "The investors pulled out of her startup this morning. The wedding's off." A beat of silence stretched between us. "She'll blame you," I said quietly. Cassian gave a bitter smile. "She already does." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you for listening," I said. He shook his head. "Thank you for telling me." When I drove back to Houston that evening, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the freeway. For a moment, I felt lighter. But I knew better than to believe the storm was over. By the time I got home, there was an email waiting for me. Subject line, "Can we talk?" It was from Clarissa. My stomach twisted as I opened it. "Marlo," it began, "I think we've all let things get out of hand. I'd love to sit down over dinner and talk this through. This family doesn't need more division. Celine's hurting. You don't need to destroy her future over old wounds." She signed it. "Love, Mom." For a long time, I stared at the screen, rereading the words. It was everything I'd heard my whole life, wrapped in sweet concern and hidden threats. Don't ruin the family. Don't hold grudges. Don't make this about you. I closed the email without replying. For years, I'd bent myself backward to be the daughter they wanted. I'd swallowed every slight, ignored every wound. All for what? So they could rewrite the story and make me the villain? Not anymore. That night, after a long shower and a glass of wine, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I typed a reply to Clarissa's email. No. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no more pretending. I hit send. Then I blocked her number. The next few days passed in eerie quiet. The family group chat went silent. Celine's social media accounts disappeared one by one. Friends who used to comment under every post fell off the radar. The whispers in the background were still there, of course. Co-workers, distant cousins, people who had opinions about family drama that wasn't theirs. But I stopped listening. I'd spent my whole life trying to fix something that wasn't broken by me. And now, for the first time, I didn't care how the story sounded to anyone else. Late one evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the Houston skyline glow against the night, my phone buzzed with one last message from an old family friend. "I don't know what's happening, but I hope you're okay." I smiled faintly, setting the phone down. I was okay. For the first time in my life, I chose myself, and there was no turning back. The days after everything collapsed stretched out like empty pages. It had been 2 weeks since Cassian called off the wedding, 2 weeks since Seline disappeared from every social platform she once dominated. 2 weeks since Clarissa's last attempt to pull me back in had failed. And the silence was deafening. The family group chat remained a graveyard. No memes, no family updates, no half-hearted birthday wishes. For years, I'd craved that chat's attention. I used to check it obsessively, hoping to see my name, to be included in the jokes, the photos, the plans. Now, it sat there, unread, irrelevant. In a way, it felt like mourning something that had died long ago. I didn't miss them. I missed who I thought they could be. One quiet Tuesday morning, as I was cleaning out my inbox, a new email appeared. From Clarissa, no subject line. I hesitated for a long moment before opening it. There was no long apology, no dramatic plea. Just one sentence. I hope you find what you're looking for. I stared at it, waiting to feel something, anger, grief, maybe even guilt, but I felt nothing at all. I clicked delete without replying. Later that afternoon, I left my apartment and walked down to the city park. It was one of those crisp spring days in Houston where the air felt lighter, almost forgiving. Kids laughed near the playground. Dog owners chatted over coffee cups. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like an outsider watching life happen without me. I sat on a bench under a wide oak tree, letting the breeze wash over me. My phone vibrated in my pocket, but I ignored it. For once, no message mattered more than this moment. I thought about everything that had happened. The birthday party, the insults, the lies, the manipulation. For so long, I'd believed that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, made myself smaller, they'd let me belong. But that night, when I walked away from Seline's birthday party, I hadn't lost anything. I'd started finding myself. And it wasn't perfect. The wounds were still there, still tender beneath the surface, but they no longer controlled me. The park around me buzzed with life. A little girl zipped past on a scooter, her parents cheering her on. For a brief second, I thought about my own childhood. The birthdays without cake, the empty chairs, the long nights wondering what I'd done wrong. And then I let it go. Because I knew now, closure doesn't come from the people who hurt you. It comes when you stop waiting for them to fix what they broke and start building something better for yourself. Before I stood up to leave, I pulled out my phone one last time and typed a message in my notes. Not to send to anyone, just to remind myself. You don't have to sit at a table where you're not welcome. You can always build your own. As I walked away from the park, the Houston skyline glittering ahead, I smiled. I left that night thinking I'd lost a family. But what I really did was find myself. And before I end this story, let me leave you with something I wish someone had told me a long time ago. Sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Not because you're unworthy, but because they're too broken to see you clearly. And you will waste years, maybe decades, trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for you. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. You don't need anyone's permission to choose peace. You don't owe anyone your silence in exchange for their approval. Walking away isn't weakness, it's freedom. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or like no matter how hard you try, you're always the problem. This story was for you. Because you're not the problem. You're the one finally brave enough to stop pretending everything's okay. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from people you thought you couldn't live without, just to finally breathe again? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home for you. Or tell me, where are you watching from? Your stories, your struggles, your victories matter here. And hey, if this video made you feel seen, if it gave you even a sliver of strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are never too old, too broken, or too late to start writing your own story.